Now, the cool thing about a country is it's also like dating. If you get there and you decide it's not right for you, you can always leave. If you get there and you commit to a serious relationship with Portugal, you get to Portugal, you realize that it's not actually the right fit for you, and there are some deal breakers that you didn't know about. The cool thing is you can choose to go back home to the US, or you can choose to move somewhere else. You don't have to commit to a country forever. Moving for the first time is not getting married. You can go to a scouting trip. It's like speed dating, right? Like you get to date your country and figure out if it's actually the right fit for you long term. So what we want to do before you move is look at the downsides. I'll say in air quotes, the downsides, the downgrades, the challenges with open eyes so that we're not walking in getting blindsided, because that's where you get there and you do panic. Welcome to the Move Abroad Coach podcast, the show for coaches, freelancers, and entrepreneurs who are ready to create freedom-based lives overseas. I'm your host, Rochelle Gamblem, Move Abroad coach and business mentor, who's built a life in 6 different countries and helped thousands of people create lives they love abroad. In this show, we get real about what it takes to make your move happen, from creating income you control to navigating visas, mindset, and everything in between. So if you're ready to design a life that feels aligned, sustainable, and truly free, you are in the right place. Let's dive in. Last summer, I was running a Q&A call with my community where it was a kind of an Ask Me Anything session around my move to Spain. And somehow the topic of dryers came up. And by dryers, I mean clothing dryers, like for your clothes. And I had mentioned that I have never had a dryer in my 13 years of living abroad, but one of the apartments that we were looking at moving into, aka the one I'm in now, had a dryer. And how I thought that was interesting. Because I've always dried my clothes on a clothing rack or a clothing line. And it was very interesting to live in a house with a dryer because I just haven't had that experience. And I was shocked to have one. And the Zoom chat on this call blew up about dryers. I was absolutely shocked because in my mind, it's not that big a deal, right? Like I have lived my life for 13 years with no dryer. And let's be real, dryers are actually bad for your clothes. They're a huge energy suck. And even now when I'm in the US, I don't use dryers except for like sheets and towels. I don't even use my dryer here in Spain unless I am in desperate need of having something dry, like my daughter's school uniforms, when we realize the night before that she has no clean ones, right? Like, yeah, it's a lifestyle adjustment, but it's not that big a deal. And I was just shocked by how it felt like I dropped this bomb in the group talking about how the fact that they're just talking about the fact that there's no dryers in a lot of countries. And I realized something, that we are always talking about the benefits of moving abroad. We don't always talk about the trade-offs, the lifestyle adjustments that come with it, right? That you have to get used to. And by we, I don't just mean me. I mean social media, general media, the conversation at large. A lot of times we talk about the benefits of relocating to another country. We don't talk about the trade-offs, the drawbacks, the pieces that are going to be hard. We talk about how the process of getting there is hard, but we don't talk about the fact that your life is going to look different in a good way, but then there are also going to be things that you've got to get used to as part of cultural adaptation. And for me, it's a no-brainer because I studied abroad in China and then I moved there right after graduation. And so I knew going to China that there were going to be lifestyle adjustments. And I was excited and also a little bit scared, especially when I went to study abroad for 6 months. I did spring and summer. And going into China, I was like, I know this is going to be hard, right? Like I know that I am going to have to really adjust. And I wanted the challenge. I wanted to experience something very different. I wanted the adventure. I wanted to grow as a person. I wanted to challenge myself. But I also knew that China was not a forever destination for me. It was a first, not forever situation, right? So I thought I was going to move to China and then eventually go back to the US. And so I've realized that a lot of the people that I work with are not thinking about the move that way, right? When you're thinking about when you're looking at moving for good or for the long haul, any sort of feedback or negative, I would say in air quotes, because to me not having a dryer is no big deal, but any sort of thing where we think, oh, that's going to be a trade-off or that's a downside to living abroad long term, not getting yourself there, but in terms of your life there, anything like that any of that info just feels so much more daunting, right? And I see this all the time, and not just with dryers, but anything that might be considered a downgrade to the conveniences that you have in the US. But it's also bigger than that, right? It's the realization that the country that you're moving to isn't perfect. Now, me moving to China, I knew that China wasn't going to be perfect. And that was kind of the point. But I think a lot of people, especially Americans relocating to Europe, we have this thought that the country that we're moving to is going to be a million times better. And it might be, but we're not thinking about the fact that it's not going to be perfect. So what happens? You set your sight on a country, you see that you're qualified for a visa, you start planning your move, and then you see something that stops you in your tracks. You start doing more research, and then you realize that housing is smaller or maybe more expensive than what you're used to back home. Unless you're from like New York or LA or San Francisco where housing's very expensive, maybe you live in the Midwest and you've got a mortgage and you've got this huge, lovely home and you're looking at the apartments that are available in Madrid and going, oh my God, that's not what I expected. Michelle's always going on and on about how things are cheaper. Look at the rent prices and look at the quality and look at the amount of space that I get. I'm not willing to settle for that. Or you see a post in an expat Facebook group about a housing shortage and how no one can find housing, despite the group having thousands of members who have all found housing. Or a local starts complaining about the healthcare system and you think, oh my gosh, the healthcare system is shit. I shouldn't move there. Or maybe you're on a call with me and you find out that a lot of countries around the world don't do clothing dryers. And then what happens? We panic. How could I possibly give up my full-sized house with a yard to live in a tiny apartment and end up paying the same amount of money? Housing shortage? Maybe I should move somewhere else. Oh no, maybe the healthcare system is going to be worse than what I have now. Maybe it's not good. Maybe it's not safe to move there. Oh my God, there's no dryers? I have to hang my clothing? But here's the thing. It's not about the dryers or the rent or a Debbie Downer in a Facebook group. It's this ill-conceived notion that the country that you're moving to is going to be perfect, to have no flaws, and nothing that will challenge you or force you to grow. Living in another country isn't easy. There will be adjustments and challenges. No country is perfect. And I have a saying, it's not as famous as all my other sayings that I'm known for, but I do have a saying around this, and that is better, not perfect. Better, not perfect. These challenges are part of the journey. They help you grow as a person. And I'm going to give you China as an example. Okay, I lived in China for 5 years, if you didn't know. China is a hard country to settle into at first. Then, after a few years, it actually becomes easy and you never want to leave. If you love it. You either love it or you hate it. That's China for you. Okay, so the people who love it, eventually after a couple of years, especially if you learn the language, it starts to become very easy and very convenient and very hard to leave. So here's the thing though. In those first few years of getting settled, China regularly challenged me. And because of that, it helped me grow as a person. China helped me chill the F out, okay? Like I realized I'm, as I joked about in our last podcast episode with Ali, I lean type A, okay? So China, especially studying abroad in China at a young age, when I was like 20, 21 years old, it helped me realize I can't control everything. I have to go with the flow. And it also helped me overcome challenges on my own. So when I had spent whatever at the time, $60 on train tickets, which was a lot of money for me at 21 years old, and I couldn't find them, I lost them. And I started crying and I had to figure out what to do because who's going to help me? No one can help me. I have to help myself. So what did I do? I figured it out. I asked around because I could not find the information online. I asked around. I talked to Chinese people, realized that if I went to the train station, I could maybe get my ticket reprinted just based on my name and my passport number. And they were like, actually, no, you can't do that. You have to do that on the train. And I had to figure this all out in Mandarin. And I'm panicking. And eventually when I get off the train, they lead me to another area in this other city. And eventually we settle on the fact that I had bought train tickets and I wasn't in trouble. And I had to do all of this in Mandarin at 21 years old. I had to figure it out. I couldn't call my parents crying. I had to just figure it out. Frustrating language barriers helped me with my emotional resilience. I learned what it feels like to be a minority and to stand out based on my physical appearance. At one point, I lived in a town in China where I was the only non Chinese person in the entire town, and everyone knew who I was. I was basically a celebrity. That is an interesting life experience. Right? Right? I know what it feels like now, especially being a white person coming from the US, like what it feels like to be in a country where I stand out. I had conversations with Chinese people about politics and internet censorship, and I learned so much. Much more so than just making assumptions around Chinese people, having never actually talked to them about how they feel about their current government. I challenged myself to become conversationally fluent in another language that's a pretty damn hard language to speak, Mandarin. I learned so much, and I'm a better, stronger, more adaptable, and resilient person because of the 5 years that I spent there. Now, Georgia, I also lived in the country of Georgia for 5 years. I didn't always have consistent water or electricity, especially water. They would just randomly shut our water off because they were working on some pipe, and we'd be like, oh, shoot, guess we've got no water for a day. And that was normal. And I did that with a newborn baby, lived in that country. It's a normal part of life there to just not always have water. And also to not always be able to find the things that I want. If I'm trying to cook certain recipes, or I'm trying to buy things, or like finding baby stuff, I couldn't always find the things that I wanted. Vietnam was way worse for that. But like, I'm used to not always being able to find certain amenities or things that I want to buy. Even in Spain, I've had to adapt. Things being closed when I want them, with siesta, or things being closed on Sundays. Sunday's like the perfect day for me to go grocery shopping. Mercadona is always closed. Medicine, you have to go get it from behind the counter. Even things like ibuprofen, you have to go into the pharmacy. You can't just get it from a grocery store or order it online. You have to go in. But then most pharmacies are closed on Sundays. And I'm like, oh my God. So then you have to walk way out of your way to go to the pharmacy literally to get ibuprofen. Also, insane bureaucracy that you have to navigate. Later dining hours when you've got a toddler and sometimes you want them in bed by 8:30, but oh, this restaurant doesn't even open till 8:30. But guess what? The US is not perfect either, and we forget that. It's like I often have to remind people on coaching calls when they come to me and they start bringing up these areas in which their dream country is not perfect, and I say, what about all these reasons that you wanted to leave the US originally? It's like we find out that our dream country isn't perfect, and then all of a sudden we forget all of the things about the US that also are not perfect. I lived in a post Soviet developing country with inconsistent water, and yet that country sends an ambulance to your house for free. That country, when I thought I was having a heart issue, apparently was just a very, very severe acid reflux. But I called an ambulance. It came to my house, and the EMTs treated me in my kitchen. We didn't even end up going to the hospital. They just gave me a shot for like severe acid reflux, and I felt better in the 15 minutes that they were there. And when they went to leave and I said, do you need my passport? Do you need my insurance? How do I pay you? They laughed and said, it's free, and left. And that is a not very wealthy post-Soviet developing country with inconsistent water still has in my mind, better and more affordable healthcare than the US in many aspects. I lived in a country where people shove their way onto the subway or the elevator without letting you get off first and cut in line and treat people like bumper cars. I say China in the West, we treat people like regular cars, where if we bump into someone, we're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. China, people are bumper cars. Okay. And so but here's the thing. China has subways and high-speed trains that are super affordable. So yeah, I'm complaining about people pushing their way on the subway while I'm trying to get off. Meanwhile, I'm on this beautiful, spacious, super modern subway with like 13 different lines in my city. I also have affordable, high-quality healthcare. And I also, I lived in a country where you don't want to piss off the government. I'm not going to sit here and say China is the best country ever. There are real challenges with China and real things that I don't like about China, specifically the government. But here's the thing. You're not going to get shot shopping at the mall, watching a movie, or going to school. Dryers aren't common in Spain, but you know what is? Universal healthcare. Good public transportation, affordable childcare, wonderful public amenities, high quality food, public safety. And where I live, 300 days of sun a year where I can dry my clothes without a dryer. And that's good for the environment and my clothes. So why do we do this? I'm not saying this to make you feel bad or make you look at yourself and be like, oh my God, I'm such a privileged asshole, right? Like, we're not trying to do that. The reason why I bring it up is I need to shock you back into really taking a step back and looking at the full picture. A while back in one of my programs, we had a Facebook group. I think it was like a solid year ago or so. We had a Facebook group, and this group of people it was a group of people that went on Idealista and started looking at properties for the cities that they were considering moving to. And now Idealista is a common property rental site for countries like Spain. I think Italy also uses it. And there's a couple countries that use it. Okay. So they went on Idealista in the summer and then saw the rent prices and the quality of homes that were available and panicked and said, I don't want to live here. This is above my budget. This is not what I want. And this is specifically people who owned homes in like non-major cities in the US, right? Because those of us from expensive cities in the US are like, oh, this is great. But if you are of a certain age, you own a home, it's a nice big home in a more affordable city in the US in terms of property, you might look at Idealista and go, oh my God, that's what's available for that price. Especially if you were looking, I'm going to use Spain as an example, in cities like Madrid and Barcelona, more so than Malaga, right? Like Malaga is a little bit more affordable. And so what happened was over the weekend, while my whole team was off, there was a small group of people who just spiraled in this Facebook group over housing and panicked and said, I don't know if I want to move abroad anymore. And we all logged back in on Monday and said, whoa, my God, let's calm down. Like, whoa, pause, take a deep breath. Let's talk about this. Okay. Like, emergency mindset session. Like, I'm going to pop a video in the Facebook group. Let's talk about this. Because here's the thing. There are things we can do about this, right? Firstly, you're looking in the summer, which is when rentals are at their most expensive, especially if some of these rentals are open to short-term leases. Secondly, we can adjust the city. You don't have to move to Barcelona. You can move to Valencia. It would be cheaper. You can move to Malaga. It will be cheaper than Valencia, right? We don't have to. We can adjust to fit your budget, okay? You haven't even gone on your scouting trip anyway. You just had never heard of Malaga and had only heard of Madrid and Barcelona, and that's where you were looking. We can also raise your housing budget if you're not factoring the fact that other things might be cheaper. For example, in the US, you probably have a car. You're not going to need a car in most cities in Spain. So we're looking at car payments, if you still have car payments on your car insurance, and gas, which is crazy expensive right now. That's going to save you money. How much are you paying on healthcare? But people do this over finances, right? Oh my God, the taxes are higher. But what are you paying for your healthcare, your car, your gas, and your childcare? Right? If taxes are just slightly higher than what you're paying in the US, but right now you're self employed and you're paying $1,000 a month for healthcare, it evens out pretty damn fast, right? If you don't have to pay for gas, if your childcare costs go from 1,000 something a month to 300 a month, it evens out. So, what we need to do is just take a deep breath and look at what's really going on. And that's the fact that moving to another country is scary. And so, what we do is we build it up in our minds to make us feel better about how scary it is. We build it up in our minds as a perfect place. And we say, yes, it's scary. Yes, this is out of my comfort zone. Yes, I'm leaving behind everything I've ever known. I'm leaving behind my friends, my family, my apartment, my stuff, potentially my job. I'm leaving behind all of these things to move. And the reason why that's okay is because this country that I'm moving to is perfect. And my life is going to be perfect there. Really? But then what happens is we see any sort of little flaw and we panic. And we start saying, but I can't move. This country has this problem. When in reality, how many problems does the US have? A lot. The US is not perfect. We all know that. And I don't say this to bash the US or say that I hate the US. I'm just being honest. It's not perfect. There are major issues. No matter what side of the political aisle you're on, the US is not perfect. Okay? But there's this fear of, what if I uproot my whole life, step away from everything I've ever known, and then I get there and I hate it? I uprooted my whole life and it's not better. It's worse. And then I want to go home. Any little flaw feels like an attack. And it took me a while to understand this because when I first moved abroad, I was going to China as a first, not forever. I was going for the challenge, for the adventure, and I knew it wasn't going to be perfect. If anything, I had a lot of people who were scared about me going there, especially because of the government. And so I knew, I was like, it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be challenging. I might hate the food after a while, or, like I might be really challenged, might have a mental breakdown when I get there. Who knows? Fun fact, actually, I love Chinese food, and it's the only country I've ever lived in where I can eat local food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day and not get bored. But anyway, that's a caveat. But I knew it was going to be challenging, and I was going in with that mindset. And it took me a second to step back and realize that the people that I work with are in a very different situation than me when I first moved. Because when I moved to China, I thought I was going to return back to the US after a couple years. Living abroad actually showed me that I don't want to go home. But when you're 22 years old, you're not selling a home. You're not moving with children, or at least I wasn't. I wasn't going with no plans to return home. But when that's you, the decision feels so much bigger, right? When you are not 22 years old, when you're going with kids or pets, when you have maybe parents who are relying on you financially, when you're further in your career, it feels way heavier. And so anytime we find what feels like a downgrade, that brain latches onto that downgrade and views it as an attack on your plan, on the idea, on whether or not this is actually going to be right for you. We go in with this idea that the country that we're moving to is going to be perfect. But here's the thing: better, not perfect. Right? We have to remember that nothing in life is perfect, especially not a full country. Every country has an issue. It's just like dating. Okay? So when we're dating somebody, there are going to be flaws in this person, because guess what? No human is perfect. And so when I was dating Chris, my mom gave me some really good advice around this. And she said, every single person has flaws, but who you end up marrying, who you decide to spend the rest of your life with, you should know their flaws going in and have decided that those are flaws that you can work with. Those are flaws that you can live with. Yeah, Chris is not perfect. He's got flaws. I know this after being with him for almost 10 years. But at the same time, I knew the majority of them going into our marriage, and I was okay with them. That's who you want to be with, right? Is somebody who sees you and sees that you have flaws and loves you anyway. That's what we do for our partners, for family members, for our best friends, is we say, I know you're not perfect. You do some stuff that really annoys me sometimes, and you have some growing to do, ma'am or sir, right? You are not perfect, but guess what? I still love you anyway. I still want to be with you, even though you're not perfect. And that's how we want to feel about our country. This country is not perfect. That's how we want to feel about our home, right? My home is not perfect. It's got some flaws, but I love it. And I knew that going in, and I still said yes because I love it. I said I love it twice. I don't care, right? Like I knew going in that there were problems. I knew going in that you weren't perfect, but I'm still saying yes to you because I made a conscious decision to wake up every day in this place or next to this person. You know, I said that to Chris recently. I said, marriage really is making a conscious decision every day that you're going to show up for your partner and that you are going to, be with them, right? Like every day you have to wake up and make that conscious decision. It's the same thing with a country that we're moving to. Yeah, there are flaws, but we're making the decision to commit anyway. Now, the cool thing about a country is it's also like dating. If you get there and you decide it's not right for you, you can always leave. Hashtag I am not a tree, right? Like you don't have roots, you can move. So if you get there and you commit to a serious relationship with Portugal, you get to Portugal, you realize that it's not actually the right fit for you, and there are some deal breakers that you didn't know about. The cool thing is you can choose to go back home to the US, or you can choose to move somewhere else. Right? Like you don't have to commit to a country forever. We're not moving for the first time is not getting married. You can date a country, right? Like you could do that. You can go to a scouting trip. It's like speed dating, right? Like you get to date your country and figure out if it's actually the right fit for you long term. So what we want to do before you move is look at the downsides, the downgrades, I'll say in air quotes, the downsides, the downgrades, the challenges with open eyes so that we're not walking in getting blindsided because that's where you get there and you do panic. Right? So when you find aspects of your country that are not everything that you dreamed of, they're not this perfect book boyfriend. It's like, oh, actually, this is like a real flawed human being. Oh, this is actually a real flawed country. Right? What we're going to do is not panic. We're going to look at what life is like objectively and make an adult decision. Is this a flaw that I can live with? Right? And also look objectively at your situation in the US and realize the US is not perfect either. And now, Monica from our team, she's one of our Freedom Life Experience coaches, she even said, I regularly see locals in the Netherlands complaining about the healthcare system all the time. And I say to them, I'm like, girl, have you lived in the US? Like, so a lot of times people complain from their own perspective, their own life perspective. So if you're seeing a local saying, well, this thing in my country is shit. Yeah, for them it is shit. But for you, it might actually be an upgrade. And we have to remember that. Okay? Everyone in this process is going to have their, oh my God, there's no dryers moment. You are going to have something like that where you either before you move, ideally, or after you move, or both, realize that there is something about your country where you're like, what? Oh my God, this sucks. You're gonna have that. So you need to know this going in. You're gonna have that feeling and you're gonna panic and realize there's a downside about your country that you were really excited about. But the people who actually move abroad and are successful and stay overseas realize that this is a natural trade-off for the life that you want to live. You assess, you breathe through the fear, and arm yourself with information, and then go anyway. We don't panic and move home because we realize that the country that we just moved to isn't perfect. I have actually never had, at this point, a client who's gone through my Freedom Life Experience coaching program and moved abroad and gone, oh my God, I hate this, and moved back to the US. That I know of, it has never happened. Why? When you do the research and you get clear on what you want and you know about your country's flaws and you choose that country anyway, that's how you end up loving your life abroad. So let's go in with our eyes open and actually embrace the adventure and the learning and the growth opportunities and the challenges. It's all part of it. Every day gets to be a new and exciting adventure for you in a country that you consciously chose. Knowing the flaws, knowing they weren't going to be perfect, you went in anyway with your eyes wide open. So let's go in and let's embrace the adventure. All right, that's everything from me today. If you are loving this podcast, subscribe on your player of choice, wherever you're listening. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you didn't know, we are on YouTube now. So if you want to watch with video, if you want to see my face, you can head on over to YouTube. I'll link it in the show notes. And if you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe. We have a new episode coming out every single week, all around moving abroad and building a life of freedom overseas that's truly aligned to you. So that's everything for this week, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the Move Abroad Coach podcast. Don't forget to hit follow so you never miss an episode. And if you're ready to take the next step towards your life of freedom overseas, head to moveabroadcourse.com to join the Move Abroad Master Plan, a self-paced course that walks you through creating your own personalized plan so you can move abroad with clarity and confidence. I'm Rochelle Gamblin, and I'll see you next week. Bye.